Administration and Economic Development Committee. Let's call it to order. If everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public notification of this meeting has been published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. And let me first say that I want to welcome all of our new members that are here. Officially for this committee, myself, Ms. Anna Marie Tabernick is our vice chair, Mr. Gerald Dawson, Mr. David Bartholomew, Mr. York Glover, and then as ex officio is Mr. Passman, who will hopefully be with us most of the time. So appreciate you being here. And then obviously to let everyone know that any council member can attend these meetings. They can vote just like a committee member does, but we do have to have a quorum of those committee people to actually hold the Finance Committee's business. So let's just move forward. Can I ask someone to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move that we approve the agenda.
Mr. Tabernick, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, if no objection, let's move on. I see no objection. And also then approval of the minutes from September 19th, 2022, and also November 11th, 2022, and also October 10th of 2022. The minutes from all those, and one of those is actually the Executive Committee minutes. If I can ask for someone to approve those minutes, or actually to make an amendment to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion. Okay. You can make
Second?
the motion. I'll second.
Well, I think it needs to be someone who was at those meetings.
So move.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
I will.
Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing no discussion, they will be approved without objection, and I see no objection. So let's go ahead and open it up now to citizens' comment.
Before you have citizens' comments, would you read number 3, please, to its public notice?
I did.
Wow, there's 3 sets.
The public notification of this meeting? I did
Oh, you
that.
did? Where was I? I must
Must
have
not have
been
been.
Not paying
asleep.
attention, yeah.
I
So-
didn't check it off.
That's all right. And also, if I could ask everyone to just silence their phones, obviously, if they could, during this meeting. But we'd like to open the floor up then to any public comments at this time. You have a 3-minute. Is there anyone that would like to speak from the audience during our citizens' comment? And there's nobody online, Sarah? No. All right, so let's move forward then to our first agenda item. And like Mr. Hayes Williams to come up, who is our Chief Financial Officer. And I'd like to commend them and also our Assistant County Administrator, Mr. Dale Butts. We're able to put in the annual comprehensive financial report. That was done on December 19th. That's the earliest that it's been done as far back as we can track, which is at least 10 years.
I went back to every annual comprehensive financial report, and it's been 10 years, and some of them were really, really old. But,
And yeah, we had to ask for many extensions in the past, so I
Yes, sir.
appreciate your staff and everything you've done. We've also received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And this is for you personally, Hayes, correct? Is this?
Well, this is so each, I'm not excellent in financial reporting. No, the certificate's from the GFA, and it's for the annual comprehensive financial report from the previous year.
Okay.
Because of COVID and everything else, the GFA, for those of y'all that don't know, is the Government Finance Officers Association. But typically, it takes them 9 months to get it done. We submitted last year in January. They didn't get it back to us until after we'd issued the audit report this year. So typically, it's a page within the annual comprehensive financial report. But considering we were doing so well and got it done so early, we actually did the report before we had the opinion letter. And then, as you can imagine, editing a 241-page document to put 1 page in, throws off all the pagination. It's a complete nightmare. So we kept it out. We got it. We're going to get our a little sticker on a little plaque for 1 more year, and we've applied for the next year.
Okay, and let me just say, for us that are uneducated in the finance world, those are both big deals.
Big
So
deals.
Yes, they are.
Big
thank you
deal.
so much.
But it all kind of led into my first slide, but what I really wanted to say is, there's no way that the county could get any of this done without the hardworking people in the finance department, and I had all of them show up today. Here they are. But they're all pieces of the whole, and so while I'm up here showboating, I guess, they're doing the hard work, the day-to-day operations. They do a tremendous job, and I can't thank them for everything that they do for me. Anyways, so that's the audit update.
That's it?
That's all I have. I mean, those are the highlights. So
We're good?
next slide. Oh, no, just for that slide. Oh, well, yeah, I'm done.
I was thinking the same thing.
We got a lot of stuff going on. That's fine. Sorry, that was my bad, my miscommunication. Okay, budget highlights. Right now, we've been, finance and Brian Cronin, who couldn't be here today, we've been meeting with department heads and going over their wants and needs for the audit, and we're getting that up and rolling. He's also been, we're in the process of completing the salaries and wages to be included in the budget for this year. We're actually using it within ClearGov, which is different than we've ever done before. So we're really scrubbing things down and trying to get it straight. We're doing it's good, progressing really well. And we are planning on doing a budget retreat with y'all in February. It kind of seemed, everybody ate too much turkey at Thanksgiving. We kind of let it lull and let January slip past us. So sometime in February, early February, I'll be having a budget retreat with everybody, and everybody will be getting up and kind of showing you their needs. So the next big thing is for the new council members, I kind of wanted to give y'all, the county distributes money. Some of it's mill-based, some of it's out of the general fund, some of it's out of local accommodations tax. But I kind of want to give y'all a breakdown of kind of our quarterly payments, and I'd like to say they're all in the same month, but some of them, because of ordinances like the A&H tax, they're not paid till the last part of the third month in the quarter. So like you'll see that, but they all got paid. But anyways, I want to go over the higher education for TCL and USCB. They both got $646,000. Both of these, they share 2.3 mils, and they split that accordingly, and that's about roughly $5 million, a little bit, it was more than that, but that they received that. For indigent care, which they received 0.4 mils apiece, Beaufort Memorial and Beaufort Jasper Comp Health received $224,000 for this quarter apiece. But that's millage based. Our DMOs, the Port Royal CVB and the Hilton Head Bluffton Chamber, received $37,500 per ordinance, and that's paid with local accommodations. We also we write a check to the solicitor, and we did that for $425,000, and that's paid out of the general fund. We keep the books for the public defender and the special revenue fund, so we just transfer it, but it's paid out of the general fund, and that was $392,000. The rest of the next four will be right out of the general fund. We paid for the quarter $884,000 to Palmetto Breeze for their transportation services. Island Recreation Center was $33,750, and that's for the recreation over on Hilton Head. The Small Business Development Corp for their help with helping small businesses within the county, that was $10,000 for the quarter. In the Ronald McDonald House, we do $20,250 quarterly, and the Ronald McDonald House does an outreach program for dental services. They have a van that goes around and helps people within our community. Some of y'all may know that, and some of y'all may not. So we also the Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation. We issued $93,750 for operations, and we also issued $447 out of the Job and Worksite Creation Fund that y'all have set up, which is based on millage. So that's what we did in the quarter, for this past quarter and the current quarter. So, but anyways, that's that.
Hayes, If you don't mind, let me just clarify one thing for council. Whenever you see the distribution for the dental bus for the Ronald McDonald House, I just want to let council know that we're going to be monitoring that this year because that dental bus has been out of commission for the last couple of years, and we've continued to fund that operation. So we will be paying close attention to that in our recommendation in this budget cycle for you. I just want to make you aware of that so that the record is clear.
Yeah, so,
Chairman, quickly, Ms. Hayes, Williams, the energy fund and the educational fund, that's based on a mill, percentage of a mill, point something mill, blah, blah. That funding, that account increases annually based on the mill leverage, or is it fixed?
well, the mill stays the same. It's based on the appraised value of the real estate. So as the real estate goes up, the mill stays the same, but the revenue
answered my
goes up
question. Thank you.
within the fund,
Thank you.
or within the giving.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Great question. Anybody else? Can you click on the financial statements portion? It's like item 7.
Oh, let me ask another question related to that.
Okay.
During reassessment, do we fix it for the next 5 years based on that kind of funding that they're receiving?
It depends on, we have to see where the appraised value sits. I would imagine that, and this is my opinion, I would imagine that the appraised values will be higher than they have been in quite a while,
Right.
and that we may have to adjust the millages.
Gotcha.
What we're going to adjust them to, I'm not really sure,
Okay.
Councilman.
Gotcha, okay.
That's a big crystal ball that I look at and try and figure out for.
Appreciate you.
It's an art. Anyways, I want to go over the financial statements for y'all, with y'all, kind of go over just how they're set up. Typically, if you look at item 7, which is on page 27, we have an executive summary of revenues and expenditures. In the top portion, you have the budget, and then you have the percent that's actually been collected to date, and you have your percentage of budget totaled and collected. So that gives you a good indicator of where we are right now. We're at 47%, and we're halfway through the year, so we should be at 50%. We're a little low, but I see that going away next year, next month, because typically our ad valorem taxes are the lead indicator of our revenues, and typically they're about 76% of our revenues, and we collect 95% of that by the end of January, or at least last year we did. So we should be much higher than that. The next one, the bar graph, kind of gives you a comparison between 22 and 23. And then the bottom gives you the budget to actual for the function, like ad valorem, license and permits, intergovernmental charges for services, fines and forfeitures, interest, budget, year-to-date, percent received, and percent completed. Now, this schedule ties to page 28 and 29, where you have the actual detail. So if you're a nerdy accountant like myself and you want to dive into the detail, you can. And so you can see where your revenues are coming from and look at them and see where they are. You'll see our intergovernmental are really off, but South Carolina Department of Revenue typically doesn't give us our increments until after the quarter. So we won't receive our second quarter until January, maybe February of the year. That's a big one. And we don't see our homestead exemption until sometime in the spring. So that's almost the entirety of that whole fund. But you can look through and see all the detail and where all our money's coming from in the county. So then on page 30, you have the detail of expenditures, and you have your revised budget and what we've actually spent to date. And this is actual spent, not spent plus encumbrances. And it kind of follows the same format as the revenues, where you compare your 22 and 23, and then you have your budget year-to-date received and percent completed. And then behind that, on pages 31 and 32, you can look at your various departments, and it's split out by category, and you can look at your individual departments and see where they're spending and whether they're over or under budget. and where they are. You look at the emergency disaster, that 326,000 was Hurricane Ian and our payments for that. That's 31 and 32. And then pages 33 and 34 are capital improvement fund, which was new this year. It's Fund 1040. And what we're having trouble doing is we get our millage in our general fund, and we'd have trouble getting all the projects complete within a year. And so this capital improvement fund allows us to do a building, and it's hard to get started, bid, construction done in the 12-month window. So usually they go over. But this is a capital improvement funds, and you'll see a lot of ordinances from the prior year that are in there, condemnations. One was budgeted surplus, and they're projects that we're all working really hard on getting done. And that's kind of where we are, but that's page 33 and 34. So that's kind of a mile-high view of everything. If y'all have any questions, or if y'all would like to, any new people or any new council members or old council members, if you'd like to schedule an appointment and pick my brain, and we can go over a 241-page ACFR anytime you want to, I'd be more than happy to meet with y'all. Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Williams?
Great job.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Hayes.
All
I
right,
think I'm gonna take you up on your offer one day.
that'd be fine. Yeah, if y'all like to coordinate and have more, yeah, I'd love to. Whenever,
Okay.
we can schedule it, and
Okay, not in the near future, that's for sure.
drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Good, let me say thank you to this committee and also to county council who stepped up a year ago and 2 years ago and actually funded more positions. The wonderful people we have sitting here that has come along to actually make this something that is very, very transparent and very open, and we have all the things that we need, so we have no excuses. So again, thank you to council for making that commitment to finance. And again, Hayes and Dale, thanks to your staff, which has done an incredible job. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's move on then to number 8 on our agenda, and that's presentation of the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 2022. And that is Mr. David Irwin, who is a partner in the Malden Jenkins firm.
Yes, sir, I'll bring that to you.
You just announced it. You're good to go. Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Mr. Irwin, thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Hope you all are doing well. Again, my name is David Irwin, and I'm with Malden Jenkins. I was the partner who oversaw this year's audit of the county's financial statements, and I, again, certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here to discuss with you the results of the 2022 audit. It's working earlier. Okay, all right. I won't take up too much of your time, but the purpose of today's presentation is to provide you all an overview of our independent auditor's report, talk about the results of the 2 compliance reports that we issue in conjunction with the audit, briefly hit a few of the financial statement highlights, discuss some of the required communications that the auditing standards, again, requires that we disclose to you all, and obviously answer any questions that you all may have. Now, the financial statements themselves that have been presented to you all are the responsibility of county's management and member of council. As your independent external auditors, our responsibility is to issue an opinion on these statements. We conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards, and I'm happy to say that we are issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on this year's report. Again, this is what you want. This is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as your external auditor. What this means is that, in our opinion, the financial statements are considered to be fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Again, as part of the audit, there are two compliance reports that we also issue. The first of which is a report called the single audit report. Again, a single audit is a compliance audit that is required when an entity has over $750,000 of federal expenditures during a fiscal year. You all had around $10.7 million of federal expenditures in FY '22, which resulted in us having to perform a single audit of two major programs. The first one being your airport improvement program, and the second of which is the funds that you received from the COVID Recovery Fund program. As was the case with the financial audit, we are issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on the single audit as well. The second report is a compliance report called the Yellow Book Report. Again, this is a report on the county's internal controls and your compliance with various laws and regulations. And I'm pleased to say that we have no audit findings to report to you all this year, meaning we noted no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the county's internal control during our audit. And as I mentioned to you all before, you all are a large county, and obviously there is a significant amount of financial activity for which you all have to account for. In addition, with all the new accounting standards that are being implemented each year, and really just how complex the financial reporting process has become, it makes it all the more impressive to be able to report to you all a clean audit with no audit findings. And again, that really to me says a lot about the hard work done by your staff. You all mentioned that earlier, but I'll kind of reiterate that. Can't tell you how good of a job they did this year. As you all mentioned, we were able to complete the audit before Christmas, December 19th. And this is the earliest the county has completed their audit since 2012. So I did look that up this morning, and it was 2012, so it was right at a decade. But again, Hayes, Denise, Christine, the entire finance department really did an outstanding job and worked really hard to make this happen. The entire finance department was very accommodating to our team, and again, worked hard to address all of our questions and get us all the necessary information and able to make this happen and for us to meet not only the state deadline but also the GFOA deadline as well. So, I've mentioned this to you all in the past, and you all mentioned it earlier, but you all have built a strong finance department over the past 2 to 3 years, and they are proactive. They call me whenever they have any questions. They don't want to sit on it and let it snowball. They want to go ahead and address it at that time. And again, that communication throughout the year really attributes to an efficient audit. So again, just want to thank your staff for their hard work this year. Now, a brief overview of your financial statements. Again, you all prepare what is called an annual comprehensive financial report, otherwise known as an ACFR. An ACFR requires the inclusion of additional information that goes above and beyond the basic financial reporting requirements. And this document, again, is submitted annually to the Governmental Finance Officer Association, otherwise known as GFOA, where they put it through a pretty stringent review process. They have not only a professional staff that reviewed your document, but also a special review committee. And when they review the county's document, their goal is not to assess the financial health of the county. What they want to do is make sure that the necessary information is in your report so the readers of your financial statements can do so themselves. And again, as Hayes mentioned earlier, through this review, the county has once again received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And this was the 13th year in a row that you all have received the certificate. So again, this is an impressive document. It's something that you all should certainly be proud of. As you look through your financial statements, one section I always like to point out is the Management's Discussion Analysis, otherwise known as the MD&A. It's right after our audit opinion. It begins on page 5. I could certainly understand you all not wanting to necessarily read all 250 pages of this document cover to cover. But if you can, I would strongly encourage you to read the MD&A. The purpose of the MD&A is to make it easier for a broader audience to use and better understand your financial statements. And it does this by providing a narrative explanation of your financial statements from management's perspective. So, if you have a question about significant fluctuations or significant changes that occurred during the year, oftentimes you can find your answer within the MD&A. So, again, this section does a really good job of introducing and summarizing the financial statements and providing the reader with an analytical overview of the financial activities that occurred throughout the year. So, again, if you can, I would strongly encourage you all to read the MD&A. The county's financial statements, they are broken up into three components, the first of which being the government-wide financial statements. Again, the government-wide financial statements, they provide a broad view of the county's operations, similar to a manner in which you would see in a private sector business. All of the county's funds are combined into either a governmental activities or business-type activities section, depending on the nature of the fund. And we have a slide here that summarizes the government-wide financial statements for the year. You know, as you can see, county ended the year with assets and deferred outflows of resources of a little over $1 billion. This is the first time that you all have surpassed that $1 billion mark. Approximately $583 million of that are your capital assets, net accumulated appreciation. Again, this is your land, equipment, buildings, and vehicles that the county owns. You all had just under $400 million in liabilities and deferred inflows of resources, which resulted in an ending net position of $660 million for the year. Total revenues, they're around $288 million for the year. You compare that to FY21, it's about a $10 million increase. Expenses increased approximately $15 million to right at $200 million for the year. And again, this resulted, as I mentioned earlier, in a net position of $660 million, which is an increase of $88.2 million for the year. So, again, all in all, a really good year for the county from a government-wide perspective. As you all, were able to increase your overall net position by 15%. So, that being said, this is an overview from the government-wide perspective. This is really the only time you'll see the county's financial activity reported in this manner. In the day-to-day operations of the county, the focus is more so on the individual funds themselves. Which brings me to the second component of your financial statements, which again are the fund level statements. Again, this is what you all typically see throughout the year. The fund level statements report the county's operations in more detail than that of the entity-wide statements. And, with all the county's funds, if I'm in your shoes, my primary focus would be on the general fund. Again, it's the primary fund of the county, and therefore it accounts for the majority of your revenues received and funds expended. We have a couple charts, the next few slides, that talk about the general fund revenues and expenditures for the year. As you can see on this chart, total revenues for the general fund were approximately $138 million, which is right in line with prior year, only around a $3 million difference compared to FY21. As you can see on this pie chart, obviously the vast majority of your general fund revenues are made up of your property taxes, which is around $105 million for the year. And that represents around 76% of the general fund's total revenues. A couple other significant sources worth mentioning. You all had charges for services of just under $16 million and intergovernmental revenue of $10.4 million for the year. This chart, again, as you can see, just shows the general fund expenditures by major function. Expenditures totaled around $121.3 million, which was an increase of about $4.5 million compared to FY21. As you would expect, public safety and general government are your primary expenditure functions. Public safety was around $46 million and accounted for around 38% of the general fund's total expenditures. And general government expenditures were around $47 million, both of which were comparable to prior year. So in total, the general fund's fund balance increased by approximately $15 million for an ending fund balance of $86.6 million for the year.
Say that again?
The general fund's fund balance increased by $15 million for an ending balance of $86.6 million.
That's what I thought you said. Go ahead.
All right. This chart, as you can see, shows the fund balance history of the county's general fund over the past 5 years. And these charts are always interesting to me to kind of see where you were and compare it to where things currently stand. And as you can see on this chart, to me just speaks volumes. You all have done a very good job over the past 5 years of continually to increase your fund balance. And with everything that's gone on over the past 3 years and the economic uncertainty that has followed it, again, it's impressive to see that you all have been able to stay within budget and to continue to increase your fund balance. And as I mentioned before, one thing I always like to remind people is fund balance, that's not what you all have in the form of cash to spend as you see fit. Fund balance is merely the difference between assets and liabilities, only a portion of which is available cash. Another thing to keep in mind is that the general fund incurs expenditures of just under $10 million per month. So you all ended the year with an unassigned fund balance equal to around 7.5 months of your operating expenditures. And with you all having a June 30 year end, again, it's good to see that the county has a strong fund balance to cover you through the months of July through November when your revenues are typically down. In addition, from the financial crisis that occurred 15 years ago to the global pandemic that we're still recovering from, to the weather-related issues that you all unfortunately have to deal with from time to time, being a coastal community. If I'm in your shoes, it's comforting to see that you all have a strong fund balance to be able to withstand such events. So again, congratulations to you all on that. A few other funds I want to briefly mention are the county's 4 enterprise funds, which again are your stormwater fund, the Beaufort Executive Airport, the Hilton Head Island Airport, and the Solid Waste and Recycling Fund, which is new this year. I believe in previous years it was a part of the general fund, but it was broken out this year as a separate enterprise fund. Enterprise funds, again, they're used to account for operations in a manner similar to what you would see in a private sector business. The goal of these funds are to be self-sufficient and to generate sufficient operating revenues to cover their operating expenses. So the chart here shows the operating revenues versus the operating expenses for these funds. The Stormwater Utility Fund and the Hilton Head Airport, they had operating income this year. The Beaufort Executive Airport and the Solid Waste, they had slight operating losses. However, when you factor in the capital contributions and the non-operating revenues that these funds received, all 4 funds increased their net position during the year. So again, that's definitely good to see. One final item to discuss is just, again, as I mentioned earlier, certain information that the auditing standards requires that we communicate to you all. With you all receiving a clean opinion and no audit findings, the information on this slide is essentially a formality, but we received full cooperation from county management staff. There were no disagreements with management on any accounting-related issues that would have affected the financial statements. There were no significant issues discussed that would have affected the financial statements in a negative manner. There were no uncorrected misstatements. And again, we are independent of the county as required by governmental auditing standards. And with that, unless anybody has any questions, that concludes my presentation. But again, as you can see, when you look through the report, there's a lot of information in here. What I've tried to do is just hit the highlights, what I think is of most importance to you all. But again, a great audit this year. Thank you again to your staff for all their hard work. And we certainly appreciate the opportunity to be of service to you all and look forward to working in the future.
Mr. Irwin, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Irwin? We have no one online, so actually Gerald's online. So any questions? Mr. Glover, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to go back to the fund balance. I know you said that all of that is not cash, but it's actually the equity of the county over a period of time. But you also mentioned about having 7 months. So is that a cash reserve for 7 months that you're speaking of? Or if we came into a disaster, we have to sell out some assets in order to make our obligation, which...
Well, that's not all in the form of cash. Again, the net position is merely the difference between assets and liabilities. In theory, 7.5 months, if the county was to cease operations on June 30 and had no additional revenue sources, in theory, it could continue to operate for 7.5 months without any additional revenue sources. So, the GFOA.
My question was, do we have to sell assets?
Yes. I mean,
okay, you answered my question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Then when I came on council, I think we had a little over 3 months reserve or fund balance. Now we at 7. What would you consider a good, healthy disposition to have going forward?
It depends on your year end. Again, if you're a September 30 year end or December 31st year end, it fluctuates. You all be in June 30 year end, 5 to 6 months. And GFOA, who, again, you all submit your report to,
So at least 5 to 6 months.
5 to 6 months is what they recommend. But again, it really varies by county, and that's essentially really up to you all as far as what's your opinion on what kind of fund balance reserves that you all need. But in generically speaking, 5 to 6 months is a good place to be at for a June 30 year.
Okay. Appreciate that. Okay.
All right, David, I've got 4 children, and I think they're perfect, but they're not. So what should we be looking out for in the future, or what kind of issues do you think that we should be concerned with on a, not necessarily with us as Beaufort County, but on a more global scale upcoming in the years to come? What are you seeing as pitfalls or troubles or things that we have to kind of plan for?
That's a loaded question. That's a loaded question. From an auditing standpoint, from an accounting standpoint, GASB continues to implement new standards each year. We implemented a new standard this year, GASB 87, as it pertains to leases. They are constantly rewriting the rule book, if you will. So from an auditing standpoint, is keeping up to date with these standards, going to the CPEs that you need, to the GFOA, which again, your staff go to all those conferences for that training. To me, that's crucial from an auditing standpoint. Any type of there were a couple recommendations, or there was really one recommendation that we had, and kudos to your staff for being proactive on it. We noted during our audit that you all had not recently conducted a complete inventory of your capital assets. And this isn't something that you need to do once every year, once every 5 years. It's really on a as-needed basis. But every so often, when we notice that there's been a lapse in that, we do encourage our clients to conduct that thorough observation. And again, you want to make sure that the assets that you all have recorded within your system or actually exist and are still owned by the county, and vice versa. There aren't any assets that you all have on your hand that aren't properly recorded. So there's nothing we noted necessarily that was an issue there. But that is a management recommendation that we made, and again, kudos to your staff. It goes back to what I talked about earlier about being proactive. Denise is on top of things. She already kind of took the bull by the horns and is going through that as we speak. So again, just another example of your finance department stepping up and doing what needs to be done.
Good. Any more questions for Mr. Irwin? David, thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here. Excellent presentation. And we look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
All right, appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you. All right, and that was something I think that Mr. Hervershawn kept preaching to us. Councilman Hervershawn was the audit for capital assets. So again, I think that's something that we will continue to push for. Next up is, and this is a long one, I'm going to read it, is a recommendation of approval of an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance and sale of limited general obligation bonds from the Bluffton Township Fire District. And we have Mr. David Cheatwood. And he is the managing partner of First Tryon Advisors. Mr. Cheatwood, thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here.
Great. Thanks very much for having me. I do think we've got a few slides to pull up as well. Great. My name is David Cheatwood. Again, I work at a firm called First Tryon Advisors. We're based in Charlotte. We serve as the county's financial advisor, and I've been in that role since last fall. So excited to be in that role. First time presenting to y'all in person. So again, thanks for having me. I am here, as you mentioned, to talk about a proposed issuance of limited general obligation bonds to fund the purchase of various pieces of equipment for the Bluffton Township Fire District. I wanted to start with just a general overview of general obligation bonds and then get into some specifics on the bond issue itself and some of the numbers behind that. If you look on the first page, which is maybe one page prior to that. Oh, no, you're on the right page. I'm sorry. Bluffton Township Fire District is a special taxing district located within the county. The county has the power to issue general obligation bonds to fund various improvements and projects within the fire district without a referendum in an amount not to exceed 8% of the district's assessed value. Using the district's assessed value from last year, which is about $715 million, Your 8% capacity, which is what that is commonly referred to, your 8% debt limit, is about $57 million. Currently, the county has issued, or previously, the county has issued 2 series of limited general obligation bonds for the fire district. The current amount outstanding right now is a little bit less than 11.3 million. Those 2 series were issued back in 2015 and 2018. And so looking at your total 8% debt limit of 57 million, the current debt outstanding that counts against that limit is a little bit more than 11 million. And so your current 8% debt capacity for the fire district is about $46 million. What you'll see in the ordinance that'll be before county council is a not to exceed borrowing of $4,250,000, so clearly well within the 8% debt limit for the fire district. In the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, this is the principal and interest that is currently being paid on those 2 series of bonds. You'll notice that it's very level at just under $1 million per year going out through 2035, and then the 2015 bonds roll off or mature and the debt service steps down. So when we look at the specifics of issuing new debt, again, you're already really level with the existing debt, so new debt is going to require some additional revenues to come in to pay for that in the form of a debt service millage increase, which I'll get to in just a second. To pay that $1 million per year, right now there are 1.5 debt service mills being levied within the district itself. And so what we're proposing here is to increase that debt service millage levy by $0.5 mil. So you'd be levying a total of 2 mills within the fire district's boundaries. These bonds, general obligation bonds, they are secured by the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the county, and it is, again, limited to all taxable property within their limited general obligation bonds because it's limited to taxable property located within the fire district's boundaries. Getting to some specifics on this proposed borrowing, as I mentioned, it's a not to exceed borrowing amount of $4,250,000. The proceeds are going to be used to purchase several pieces of equipment for the fire district. I think we have the fire chief here today if you have any questions on the specific equipment that is being purchased. As I mentioned, we are proposing to increase the millage by $0.5 mil to a total of 2 mills, debt service mills levied within the fire district. When we look at that analysis, we are looking at your existing debt service, principal plus interest on those 2 series of bonds, and then we're stacking on top of that a proposed debt service for this new borrowing. We're looking at an estimated interest rate and an estimated final term, in this case, or final maturity of 7 years. And so a pretty rapid payoff of this debt. And that'll help when we look at the total picture here in another slide. With the rapid pay down in this debt, that then produces capacity in a few years down the road, as there will likely continue to be needs within the fire district. And so in a few years, when this debt begins to be paid off, you'll have capacity to potentially issue new debt for fire district projects with hopefully not much, if any, millage increase necessary then. As a part of our analysis, we're looking at what the current value of a mill is within the fire district. It's about $735,000. We do estimate an increase in that value of a mill as your general assessed value grows, your value of a mill will grow. And so we have assumptions on what that will be over the next several years. We're a little bit more aggressive is a strong word, but a higher growth rate assumed for the next couple of years, and then we dial that back after 3 or 4 years, just not knowing what the future will hold. We're a little bit more conservative in later years. The other thing to point out is with the 1.5 mils that has been levied for the existing debt, you've built up a little bit of a fund balance within your debt service fund for the fire district, not to be confused with the county's general fund. This is a totally separate fund. And so when you look at the proposed debt service structure, which is in the bottom of slide 2, you'll see principal plus interest and then total. That's the total debt service you pay in a given year. You'll see that there's a big number up front in 2024, and then it dials back in the next 6 years. That's to flush out some of the excess that's built up in that debt service fund, which is really typical. When you are levying mills, you're basing that on an estimated value of a mill. You tend to get in a little bit more. You'd much rather have a little bit more come in than less, obviously. And so what we're proposing to do here is upsize that first principal payment to flush out some of that excess and then get on a level, approximately level payment thereafter. we'll get to the timetable here at the end, but you would issue these bonds this spring. You would pay those back in annual installments over the next 7 years, and so that final maturity would be in March of 2030, so a 7-year final maturity. If you wanted to look at all the numbers behind the analysis here, this will show you the increase in the millage proposed increase in the millage from 1.5 mils to 2 mils. That would happen this fall, so fall of 2023 tax bill. Those revenues would come in December, January, so fiscal year 2024. And those revenues, coupled with, again, the use of that fund balance in the debt service fund for this upcoming payment, would bring that balance more in line with what is a good balance to use going forward, to have some conservatism in there. And then what you're tracking really is total revenues versus total debt service. And you'll see beginning in 2025 out through 2030, those are approximately equal based on our assumptions. And so that is the proposed schedule, debt service schedule there. It's based on an estimated interest rate. So how do we lock in the rate itself? If you look at the next slide, an issuance of general obligation bonds requires 3 readings of a bond ordinance by county council as well as a public hearing. So we would propose to have those readings at your January 23rd meeting for first reading, February 13th for second reading, and February 27th for the third reading. The public hearing we would propose to hold at your the second of those 3 readings on February 13th. After that third reading, there's a 60-day challenge period after that, and so we would close just after that 60-day challenge period expires, so in early May of this year. During that time period, there's 2 different markets you can issue this debt in. You all have done both. You can go out to what's called the public market, where you get credit ratings, and the bonds are sold to an underwriter, who in turn sells them to a variety of different investors. Or you can do a bank-placed financing. We would propose here, recommend to do a bank-placed financing. These would be sold competitively, which you have to do in South Carolina for general obligation bonds. We would prepare a request for proposals or a notice of sale that would go out to all the banks, local, regional, national banks, and then request bids on a date and time certain. And once those bids come in, accept the lowest rate, your rate is then locked in until we close those bonds in early May. According to this schedule, or per the schedule, we would get those bank bids in on April 4th, and that would be the date and time you lock in your interest rate. We're assuming for the numbers we looked at just a slide ago, a 4.25% interest rate. That's conservative based on current rates. We think if you did that today, you'd be more like a 3.5% to maybe 3.7%. As you may be aware, interest rates in general have been going up and jumped up a little over 2% during calendar year 2022. So we're in a higher interest rate environment than we've been in years past, but still, put it in perspective, historically speaking, still a very low interest rate environment. And so that's the general overview. Again, you've got the full, I believe you have the full bond ordinance, and that would come for first reading next week. I believe I saw your bond counsel, Franny Heiser from Byrne Foreman, is on virtually as well. If you have any specific questions on the bond ordinance itself, or if you have any questions on the numbers, happy to answer those, or the projects. You got the fire chief here as well.
Let me first welcome Chief Boulware. He's been here many times before, first time as chief, so we thank you for coming. Would you like to say anything with regard to and again, this is for the Bluffton Township Fire District only, so it does not affect other places in the county that are under different, Hilton Head and Beaufort. So this is just for the Bluffton Fire District that we're talking about today.
That is correct, sir. So basically from Broad River Bridge all the way to Jenkins Island, Hilton Head Bridge, all the way out to New River Bridge to Pritchardville area. So the district finds itself in some finance issues sometimes with a lot of our equipment only has like a 10-year lifespan. And so trying to juggle those within our operating budget sometimes taxes us due to the cost of some of these projects. And so we came up with the idea, worked with Franny and David here, if we could get on a 10-year replacement cycle for some of these capital, then it just puts a small millage rate onto the debt. You look at our millage for our debt services compared to some of the other organizations, it's really small. In the way our values have been increasing, that's how we ended up with that surplus there. So, it's 2% now, but the way the millage is coming in, it could be even less than that. We don't know. But yeah, trying to get some of these major capital projects under our belt would definitely be beneficial for the citizens and the district.
Okay, good, thank you. Let's open up to council members. Anyone that has a question? Chairman Passman, go ahead.
Chief, the equipment you're talking about,
Yes, sir.
major costs, items?
So there's several. The first and major, most being the personal protective equipment for the firefighters. The gear that they wear has a 10-year life expectancy, so after 10 years, NFPA requires us to replace it. So we typically we took the number of firefighters that we had and tried to break it down into 5-year increments. The problem is, we've been hiring personnel, and so those funds have been generated towards new gear for new personnel because we opened up 2 new stations. So we're playing catch-up. So we would like to replace all that gear at one time and get us on a replacement schedule for all new gear. And then the other is the air packs that the firefighters wear. They call them SCBAs. The last one we got about 13 years ago, and NFPA requires if you go through 3 service changes, upgrades, in other words, if that air pack has more than 3 upgrades, then it's time to replace it. And we're at that point now. So our air packs are roughly like 13 years old. So we need to get a new model to make sure our firefighters are up to date and have the safest equipment possible. Our support vehicles, not the fire engines, but the support staff, the maintenance, the inspectors, all the admin personnel. We have a fleet of vehicles. I've got a list here. And this says a lot about our maintenance facility because we have, this is a list of our entire vehicle fleet, and I've highlighted the ones that are due for replacement. And we have 3 vehicles that are over 12 years of age, 4 that are over 15 years of age, 1 over 17 years, 2 over 23 years, and 1 at 27 years of age. So what we'd like to do is replace those vehicles as one to get us on a replacement plan. And it also helps with the maintenance of our vehicle. Like we purchased some vehicles not too long ago, 2017, a fleet of 5 vehicles. And so keeping those constant, buying parts or tires or batteries or whatever, makes it easier for that one type of vehicle. We have a radio upgrade. The support vehicle was $500,000, I'm sorry. And we have radio upgrades for our radios for the stations. Technology, things change. Our radios are basically out of date. And next year, all the radios inside the stations will be inoperable. And with that are some of the handheld portable radios that we have. That's a long story there, where EMD used to provide some support with some of that ancillary equipment. Now it's fallen back onto the fire districts to purchase their own radios for operations. So that's where that comes in. We have some rescue tools for about $200,000. You know, that's the jaws of life that we use to cut people out of cars and everything. We upgraded that when we bought a rescue truck a couple years ago, but we still find ourselves needing a little extra equipment there. We got $200,000 for thermal imagers, the cameras that the firefighters use when they go into IDLH atmospheres where they can't see. It's pitch black, it's heat. Basically, it's a camera that sees through the dark and everything. So we try to provide our firefighters with the best tools possible if we have to make a rescue. And those that we have are kind of outdated. Trying to get parts to keep them going is a challenge. And then the last is our cardiac monitors for $500,000. The defibrillators that we carry on the trucks, those have like an 8 to 10 year lifespan depending on how you treat them, how you maintenance them. We have maintenance contracts. We try to keep them going the best we can, but they're due for replacement. So trying to replace all those at one time so you have one common piece of equipment on the trucks where you can train people to one standard, where you don't want them trained on an older model that works a little bit different than the other model. You kind of want that to flow when they're on calls and on scenes to be, you know, I push this button and this happens, where on this one I have to push this, then this. So it's kind of a thing. But that's our major capital that we're looking for.
Thank you for that. I'm appreciative of that.
Yes, sir.
Knowing full well Bluffton is growing and will continue to grow. Trying to say this delicately, what you're proposing, is it enough? Will this be something that will bring us up to current standards, or are we still going to be behind?
No, sir. And that's funny that you say that. When we made our board presentation to our fire board, it was a little bit less than this amount. And our chairman here, Mr. Lou Poindexter, part of the board had the same comment. Is that enough? And so we went back, went to the program managers and said, what do we need? Let's, cards are on the table. What do we need? And so this is very robust and will help us tremendously.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Actually, what happens, what do you do with the old equipment? Is that auctioned off? Or
It
that-
is. The county has the gov deals. So like the air packs will be bundled up. Typically, we take those and we don't sell them all. We'll break them up into different lots, try to get a little more bang for our buck. Not every department needs to buy 50 air packs at one time. So we try to sell them in smaller lots. The vehicles, we've done that numerous times. You don't know whether you're going to get $1 or $1,000. So, but yes, sir. Thank you. You bet.
Mr. Glover,
Yeah, Chief, I'm assuming that all of your chief sit around and talk, because Chief Klein basically said the same thing to me, that he's looking at a replacement plan over the next 10 years and getting new equipment in there to do likewise what you're talking about doing. One of the things that I was very impressed with you, or the Bluffton Fire Department, was your maintenance facility.
Yes, sir.
Are y'all getting units from different part of the county to be a part of that service, generating some revenue for you as well? But
We do.
Okay.
So when, back in one of the bonds that Mr. David talked about in 2015 was for a training facility, and part of that training facility was a maintenance facility. We were working on our own equipment because we found it cheaper and the level of service. We have qualified people. And the problem we were having, we would send vehicles mostly to Savannah because that's where all the big trucks go. And you're just a number over there. You're just a spot in line. They say they give you a preference, but it just doesn't happen. So we got the board on board, and they helped fund a maintenance division for ourselves. And yes, we opened it up to other government agencies. We stay out of the private sector. So currently, we do repairs for USCB campus. Some of the highway patrol gets vehicles. The town of Bluffton, the Bluffton Police Department, the city of Beaufort, Port Royal Fire Department sends vehicles over. Technical College of the Low Country sends some of their tractor trailers over for us to service. So yes, sir, we have the people on staff to work on our stuff, and so we're able to supplement their salaries and expenses that we incur by working on these outside projects that do not hamper our own at the same time.
okay, thank you. Then to Mr. Cheatwood. Normally I thought we issued bonds for the whole entire county because it's cheaper to do that because of the expense, et cetera. So I'm anticipating that we are not going to be issuing any general obligation bond for the county. Okay, it's just.
Yeah, I think not on this same timeline, but I think y'all do have a number of needs countywide that you would look to maybe later this year. That's right.
yeah, so we're good.
I had a question for the chief. Is your fire district have the most personnel of all the districts, including Hilton Head in the county?
Yes, ma'am. I believe we actually, so us and Hilton Head, we're kind of going back and forth there. We have 9 working fire stations, and we have 168 paid employees right now.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Brown?
You mentioned the bonds going out to different banks. What banks are you going out to?
We keep a list of about 40 banks. Again, they're the local banks, they're statewide, regional, national banks, a lot of which you've heard of. They're on the corner, or other ones you've heard of. Others that you probably haven't heard of that just have a bucket of money that they want to lend to municipalities. And so we try to get it in as many hands as possible. And we start with our list, and then we work with county staff to make sure that we're covering all your local banks, just in case there's a couple on there that aren't on our list, which does happen from time to time. So we would look at our list, compare it with county staff, send that out directly, and then at the same time, the bond counsel is posting what's called a summary notice of sale in the paper. And so if anyone's tracking that doesn't get it from us directly, it's posted out there.
But we use local state banks before we use the national banks?
No, we do not distinguish, we'll take all the bids that come in, and with general obligation bonds, again, Franny, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you would just take the lowest interest rate. And so if you had a local bank that had a higher interest rate, but you wanted to use local, I think under state law, you can't do that, but Franny, correct me.
I wish we could.
Yeah, I think if you were doing a different type of bond that wasn't a general obligation bond, you would have a little bit more leeway, picking kind of the best overall. But again, I think with general obligation bonds, typically lowest cost is the winner.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Chief, well, I'm gonna piggyback on Mr. Passman's question. You probably know what I'm gonna ask. Will this cover expenses and items and equipment for the new station planned in Sun City and Princeton?
Yes and no. I mean, it's for the firefighters. Most of it is the personal protective equipment, so that's for
Right.
the people that we have now. The new hires, so we probably hire 12 people for that. That we would fund in our normal operating budget.
Okay.
We have about a $275,000, $300,000 line item in our operating budget for gear and items of that nature. So yes, it will be supported.
Okay, so they won't be running around without equipment?
No, ma'am, absolutely not.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Greenway, is there anything that staff wanted to add to this?
I have
Ms. Brown?
something I want to bring up. I moved here from the Commonwealth of Virginia, and the fire departments had bingo. It raised an incredible amount of money for the fire departments. If they needed new equipment, they got it. They needed new uniforms, whatever they needed, they had it, because they would have bingo down on Wednesday night, another one over in Elkton at Saturday night, and it raised an incredible amount of money. And I'm going to find out how we can do that here.
Can't.
Why?
You need a bingo license.
Yeah, it's state law.
It's state law, so we have to get it through the legislator up in Columbia? Is that right?
It's the way, yes.
Okay.
Or you can hire someone licensed to do it. It's a game of chance.
Right.
We've investigated this fully.
Oh, in Sun City, yeah.
Trust me. But there are places that,
If there's
there
a
are
will,
vendors
I
that
think
do
there's a
that.
way.
Yeah.
And also people would bring in their pies and sell them, it's a nice way for the community to get together and raise money for the fire department. And let me tell you, they do not need for anything.
Good. Thank you. That's a great idea. I never thought about that. That's a
Yeah.
great idea for fundraising. But, all right, so we're at the point now where we either need to make a motion to approve or deny, and this would actually go to county council for 3 readings. So I'm looking for someone to make a motion to approve, and I can actually read the amendment if you want me to, but I need someone to make that motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right.
And I'll second
Is
it.
there a second?
I'll second.
And Sarah, we're looking at what has been spelled out for us in the, which is a recommendation of approval of an ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance and sale of limited general obligation bonds, Bluffton Township Fire District, Series 2023A or such other appropriate series designation of Beaufort County, South Carolina, in the principal amount of not to exceed $4,250,000, fixing the form and details of the bonds, authorizing the county administrator or his lawfully authorized designee to determine certain matters relating to the bonds, providing for the payment of the bonds and disposition of the proceeds thereof, and others matters relating thereto. So that's actually the motion. And is there any objection to the motion? Seeing no objection, this will go ahead and be passed and sent to county council. Great. Mr. Cheatwood, thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here. Chief Boulware and Mr. Poindexter, thank you for being here. And again, your position is never, people never say thank you, so thank you for what you do and tell your board the same thing. We appreciate everything you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on then to Number 10, and this is recommend approval of an ordinance to appropriate funds from the state's 2% accommodations tax fund and other matters related thereto. And we have Mr. Dick Farmer, but Mr. Farmer, first I'm going to have Mr. Williams come up, and I want to real quick just have him explain the differences in A-tax, H-tax, and what the different boards are, especially for new members, and even for the public, so we know, because again, it gets very confusing even for people that are on county council, so.
It gets confusing for me. I've read these ordinances ad nauseum many times, and I'm the de facto expert. But basically what we have in Beaufort County is we have three. We have the state accommodations tax, which is a 2% tax that's levied by, is collected by the South Carolina Department of Revenue. We have a local accommodations tax, which is 3%. We have a local hospitality tax, which is 2%. The state accommodations tax has a separate board. It is nominated by y'all, and it's made up of 4 members to be selected from the hospitality industry of the county. 2 members shall be selected at the pleasure of council, and 1 member shall be selected from a cultural organization. And they go through a process where the people apply for their needs that they have within their organization. Our grants accountant Ryan Muth, who's not here right now, he goes through them. He puts all the packages together, and then the state accommodations tax board gets together, and then one day they go through all the applications. They talk to anybody that asks, anybody that applies for the award, and then they make their recommendations. We, based on what we collected in the first quarter for the state accommodations tax, we ended up bumping up the amount that they've given, and so they've actually changed the amount that they've given, but that's up to their board. The local accommodations and the local hospitality are governed by a committee that's appointed by the county administrator, and it's a very similar process where different entities, we give entities 2 months to put in their applications, and then the committee will go through and make awards based on what's in those taxes. And we should be having that meeting sometime in late January, early February, and getting those to you hopefully by the next finance committee meeting. But that's basically a synopsis of it all. The accommodations tax obviously comes from overnight stays. The hospitality tax comes from prepared foods and alcoholic beverages. So anytime you go to a restaurant or a bar and order a salad and a beer, or steak and beer, or whatever, and a beer, glass of wine or whatever. Anyway, so it's all. We pay, every citizen or anybody from out of town pays on that. The accommodations would just be for people staying in hotels or B&Bs and stuff like that. Any questions? Okay. I'd like to, I guess, Dick Farmer's the head of, he's the chair. Y'all have seen him before. He does a pretty amazing job. They do a great job for us, and all they ask is lunch from Jimmy John's. So we're good. So, well, I mean, I can't pay for it, but I like the farm. So.
Yeah, I noticed it could be a Coke and then we have beer and something of beer. So. That's it. Mr. Farmer, thank you for coming back. It's glad to see you again. So we appreciate you being here. So
thank you. I had a whole pitch ready for how we do what we do, but Hayes has covered most of it. I will tell you this past year was a perfect storm for Beaufort County. We had about 24 applicants. We normally have 40, and we had $1 million to distribute. We usually have 500,000 or 600,000. So if you've looked at the proposal, you see we made a lot of organizations happy. Mr. Chairman, I don't know how you want me to proceed. What I normally do is just answer questions. So
I think that's, everyone's had a chance. This came out on Friday in the packet, so everyone has had a chance, or they could have looked at it. And remember, this will go to full county council for 3 readings for approval. So a lot of times today is a formality of us approving this and sending it on to council. And if there is questions, we ask Mr. Farmer now. and he'll come back with answers. If he can't answer today, come back with answers for us at the next meeting. We usually ask him to come back for at least the first reading of this ordinance to cover anything that comes up. So obviously, if folks have questions, and Ms. Taberner, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, in looking at the list, I'm just curious, number one, Greater Beaufort, Port Royal CVB got $100,000 over what they requested, and about 30,000 down number 17, Low Country and Resort Islands got more, and then others, some didn't get what they requested. So I was just wondering why that occurred. And I have another question. Do we audit their expenditures? I mean, do we look at their expenditures, make sure how they're spending it?
Let me answer the first one first. If you look at our recommendations traditionally, the two organizations that got overfunded are always right at the top of funding because we believe they give the biggest bang for the buck for getting tourists here. The ones who didn't get, this is a 7-member board who negotiate through a process. So as we do the interviews with all, let me back up. We get all the applications, as you heard Hayes say. All of us go through all the applications before we do the interviews. We come in and give each applicant 10 minutes to make an impression or answer questions, primarily the latter, and we make an individual decision what we think they ought to get. When it's all over, we do what I call sore thumbing. We negotiate. And the ones who didn't get as much as they asked for, first off, this is the first year we've ever given anybody everything they asked for. So the ones that didn't get as much, in our judgment, are not as big a bang for the buck in attracting tourists. There's no formula for the answer for that, unfortunately.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Howard.
Yes, ma'am.
In years past, we've seen the applications I think when it went to full council, that was, if I recall correctly.
That were what?
We've seen the applications, so we could look at them ourselves. This is just a list today. I would really like to see the applications themselves, so it gives us a little bit more knowledge of it. And I know we've done that for the local hospitality taxes too in the past. So it might take a little bit of scanning, but I think it's very worthwhile for county council before we take the full vote to see exactly what are we getting for all these different items.
We've never done that since I've been about 13 or 14
It might have been the
years.
local that I'm thinking of. I know that we have done it in the past. It might have been the local hospitality.
They're in a software system that was used to distribute to all of us. If you want to go through them,
I would like to, yes.
they could be up to 80 and 90 pages apiece.
That's okay. I think this is a lot of money and we need to.
Yeah, I guess just ask Hayes.
Mr. Chairman, I did, just by these brief descriptions, I'm not,
Yeah.
I mean, y'all do a great job reviewing things, but just a few words on this one sheet of paper doesn't tell me enough about what they're doing.
So I guess the question would be to Hayes or to Mr. Greenway is if council can have access to that system and they can then go back and look at the.
They're in Dropbox.
They're in a, I don't have my own mic down there. But they're in electronic form and we can get them to you. We just haven't, I think we may have done it once or twice with certain applications in the past, but not as a whole. I can have Ryan share the Dropbox with y'all and y'all can look at them as y'all at your leisure and before the next
And
council
we
meeting.
have plenty of time, I think, because we have 3 readings, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any pros or cons with that from legal? I can't think of anything why you wouldn't have that access. Is that?
Legally, any member of the public is certainly entitled to request them through FOIA. So if council wants to look at them, of course, council, there's nothing in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, we would encourage the council to thoroughly vet the applications that were submitted before you take your final vote, because there are some substantial increases over what was awarded versus what was requested, and some applications didn't even make it through the process before they were rejected for any level of funding, including county park projects.
I was gonna ask that question, so you answered it for me.
So that he said that didn't make it through the process, county clerk?
So there are, Mr. Farmer, so there are applications that are rejected because they're missing things or they don't qualify or what,
Yes to both of those statements.
Okay.
We've had, in many years, we've had very poor applications come through that we couldn't even evaluate, so we would reject them. This particular issue that was brought up, the park, it is authorized under the legislation, but we have two questions to answer. One is it going to attract or support tourism? And two, can you prove it? We didn't feel the answer yet was yes to either one of those questions for the park. And we actually are late coming to Finance Committee because we were asked to get the board back together to reconsider the park, and we did. And the answer was the same. This normally would have happened last year. In fact, a couple of the applicants who are due money are hurting because it's late. So, and that's not anybody's fault. I'm just giving you a statement.
in years past, is it a requirement to give out all money that you've received or is there any carryover sometimes or how's that?
We endeavor to give out every single penny. We never come to the county with a holdback, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, just
Never. We've had some funny things happen over the years, but it's our intention to give out everything.
okay. Good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a quick question. Mr. Farmer, there are probably some first-time funders in this application. Is there any way you highlight that, or you can highlight that? You don't have to do that now.
You mean
but-
first-time requesters?
Yes.
There's always some first-time
Yeah.
requesters.
Could you?
But keep in mind, this is 24 applicants. We usually have 40, and I can't begin to tell you why that is.
No. I just want to know first-time funders in here, but I don't need to know that now. The other question is, the increase of 156% of requests.
Yeah.
Let me hear my question. Does that become the benchmark for next year?
No, sir.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you, sir.
No, it does not.
Okay.
There are no benchmarks for individual applicants. As you can see by the spreadsheet, they come in with a request, and then we evaluate it.
Right, I get you. Normally, all I see here is last year's funding, this year's request, last year's funding, and what is recommended.
Yeah.
Recommended. So I would not know unless I go back in the file and that the increase from last year was 156%, unless you make a notation of that somewhere. Based on this one sheet, I just have to go back in the file to find that out and stuff. That's all.
Sir, I'm not sure I'm understanding the
Oh,
question.
okay. Let me make it clear. 280,000 will show up next year if that request has come in as 280,000 funded for last year with a request of maybe 180,000, and then the recommended may be 180,000. I look at that for next year and say, why did you? But the request would be the key for that. That's all.
Each
Yeah.
year, let me say it
Each
this
year
way,
is different.
each year stands alone. This year will have no impact on next year. None. We evaluate each application each year for its own integrity. Does that answer the question?
You answered my question. I just need to know, how do I get information without going back into the archive to figure out what happened last year? That's all.
Well, let me say this. The applicants that applied last year, you see them here. The ones that don't have a request from last year are new or didn't apply last year. And so we would have had some last year that didn't apply this year and some this year that didn't apply last year. So each year stands alone. But these spreadsheets, I mean, I'm sure the county could supply the spreadsheets I've been doing it for 12 or 13 years, and every year we've used those spreadsheets, so.
I think what Mr. Glover is trying to say is if you take a look at number one, last year they received $175,000. I believe his question was that $175,000 more or less than what they actually requested last year.
Oh,
So that when you're taking a look at the $280,000, that becomes the benchmark.
this is the first year that any number like this got 100% of ask. Because we usually, this is a rough number. We usually come in with $1.5 million worth of requests, and we usually have $500,000 or $600,000.
Gotcha.
So nobody gets 100% normally. This year may be an anomaly
Okay,
because of the number of candidates and money.
okay. When, if I may, when an applicant comes in with a request, they have their application that you review, which to me would basically say, if I'm requesting $180,000, I have a spending plan for that $180,000.
Yes.
Now you've said, we're gonna give you another $100,000. Do they have to tell us, well, this is how I'm gonna spend the extra 100,000?
When Port Royal comes in next year, I would expect to see data on how they spent the money.
Gotcha. Okay.
Remember when I said there's two things we check for, number of tourists in and proof of that? We make people present proof.
Okay.
But at this particular point, they don't have a spending plan for an extra $100,000.
Oh, yes, they do. In particular, at Port Royal, they come in with their marketing plan.
Okay, but they asked for 180,000.
I know, but we're a part of their market spend. They spend much more than just what they get from us. So we're able to see their entire marketing plan.
Okay.
And in that case, it's all advertising. So extra money means extra advertising, which means bringing more tourists. That's our philosophy anyway.
All right, so I think we're going to have council be able to have access to all the applications, both the ones all the ones that have been submitted, whether they've been approved or denied. People can look at them then. And as opposed to us hammering Mr. Farmer, I think that if there's a question, it should probably come back to me. Short and simple and sweet, that we can then get to Mr. Farmer so he's not blindsided, or he can answer before our next meeting. And keep your questions kind of to a minimum, and not short as we can. And then we'll any question comes in, everyone from council will have the response that comes from that. I think is the correct way to handle that. Yes, sir.
And by no means are we attacking you in any way, shape, or form.
I don't.
Certainly, with new members on county council, they have every need to know exactly how things are developing. So this is my question.
I anticipated that.
Thank you for what you do.
Is ready.
Yeah, after 12 years, yes, you obviously, Ms. Brown.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. There's only one chamber on here. Why aren't all of them on here?
That's a very good question. We don't solicit. Hilton Head stopped applying some years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Bluffton has never applied. They're small.
Oh, okay.
And Port Royal is a DMO, so for over here, they're getting taking care of that.
I can speak to that, or a little bit to that, if you like, Councilwoman. As part of the way it's set up right now by statute, the local accommodations tax, you have two DMOs to get $150,000, and that's the Beaufort Port Royal CVB and the Hilton Head Bluffton Chamber of Commerce. In the Beaufort County Black Chamber of Commerce, gets $550. In the state accommodations tax realm, the Port Royal CVB and the Greater Beaufort Hilton Head Chamber of Commerce get 15% of the gross before they get an ask on this. So there's a whole different set of. They're asking for additional funds out of the state accommodation more than they get from them already. And I could give you those numbers, but I don't have them offhand right now. But to Councilman Glover's point, I can put what was requested last year and what was awarded last year for the different agencies. I can do that tomorrow if it would help and send you on that.
before new applicants.
We'll make it, we'll see who the new applicants are on there.
Okay.
But most of the new applicants wouldn't have
Any funding from last
wouldn't
year.
have requested anything from the prior year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't want to make that assumption, but you're probably right.
I bet dollars to donuts.
More information, and, so questions on that, I mentioned going back to B-State. We both get it, in case, sometimes things get sent to my junk mail, but yeah, please send that back with questions. And, Mr. Farber, again, thank you for coming. Come and you do a great job and put lots of time in, and have us come in and question what you do. Again, we appreciate what you do. You've done a tremendous job. So again, thank you for coming out today.
Was Ms. Howard the second?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We done?
Yes, Mr. Farber, thank you.
Right.
You gave a head nod as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to number 11, and that is stormwater required procurement of a Rover X truck and DC
Mr. Chair.
500 camera.
We didn't take a vote on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. We got a first second. So, is there any objection to the motion that was made? That was Mr. Trevor and seconded by Ms. Howard. I see no objection, so it has passed without objection.
Yes.
Thank you for that. All right, let's move on then to number 11, and that's stormwater required procurement of a Rover X truck and DC 500 camera, and I think that's Mr. Fralick coming forward.
Good afternoon. This will be the quickest and easiest agenda item on today's agenda, I hope. So this is a piece of equipment that stormwater uses. We have a box camera where we send the camera inside a storm drainage line to inspect it to make sure everything's up to snuff. That camera has quit working and contacted the manufacturer, and they've actually discontinued that product entirely. So we're not able to get it serviced. We knew that the camera was on its last leg, so we budgeted for this in the past budget. So we went out to bid and got bids here, and so the bid is for $227,769.84. It's already included in the stormwater budget, and just needs your approval so we can place that order. Upon approval, this would not need to go to council because the procurement limit would be less than what committee can approve, so we could take action from there.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve this purchase.
Is there a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And any discussion?
I just have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What would be the timeline to get this piece of equipment? Is it like the rest of the world on some boat somewhere?
Probably so. It takes a while, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
okay.
specialty equipment, so just times to whatever your typical delivery is.
Months. Okay.
And just real quick, Jared, is this, you said you go out to bid, is this done through the Sourcewell contract, or just real quick for our new members, how does that work when it comes to the Sourcewell contract?
Yes, so Sourcewell, yes, I believe this is Sourcewell. Yes, it is Sourcewell. So Sourcewell is basically an agency out there that has pre-bid a lot of items, a lot of usually public works items or technical items, and it's pre-approved, so counties and municipalities can basically refer to their procurement to act on behalf of their own procurement to help expedite the procurement of these type of materials, pumps, machinery, and stuff like that.
All right, good. So any more discussion? Seeing no discussion, this will be approved without objection. Any objection? I see no objection, so thank you, Mr. Fralick. Appreciate you being here today. Thank you. All right, let's move on now to number 12, and recommended approval of a resolution authorizing the county administrator to enter into a lease agreement with the Beaufort Elite Volleyball Club for a portion of real property located at 2727 Depot Road. Again, Ms. Ward, our county attorney, you're going to be handling this for us.
Good afternoon. This is for a portion of the warehouse that's located at 2727 Depot Road. The front portion of the building is the current location of the EMS. The back portion is not being used. We identified it as a surplus for the county. And a group called the Elite Volleyball. They're a nonprofit organization that provides a volleyball sporting club whereby they have practices 3 days a week, and tournaments or games are held outside of county. They have currently been leasing from the school district, and at this point they are looking for another facility so that they can have a little bit more flexible practice times. Previously they were starting practices between 6 and 7. If you're in middle school or high school, that means you're not getting home till about 10 o'clock at night. So we are allowing them specific times to lease the facility starting at 5 o'clock, which means parents can pick up the kids and come directly to volleyball practice without delay. So we have from 5 to 9, 3 days a week, I believe. The price pursuant to our lease policy that was recently put in place, we are using the rental fee schedule that was put in place by the Parks and Recs program. We are awaiting our appraisals to come back for our lease policy. So we've used the rates that we have for all the other facilities. They are receiving a nonprofit discount pursuant to our policy of a 50% discounted rate.
All right, any questions for Ms. Ward? I do have some questions because obviously I get lots of calls from lots of travel facilities. I do see this is a month-to-month lease. Is that correct?
It is for 1 year at a time, but it's for specific periods.
So again, I think this is wonderful. However, does this put us in any trouble of not putting us out to bid to other groups that might want the same thing?
Our policy says that they can come to us if they want for potential space released. Again, this is for 3 days a week. So if we have other space available, they're happy to put in an application. Elite Volleyball did as well.
Okay, because there are other volleyball clubs and there are travel baseball teams and softball teams and soccer teams that all look for winter space to do things. And again, I think it's a great idea. I'm not trying to shoot this down at all,
Understood.
but I think that we're going to have other groups come out and also then ask for the same thing. So it is a year lease. It's not month to month. I thought I read it was month to month. So I guess I'm incorrect. And then also your address is properties to be leased are not correct on the lease itself at the bottom, at least in my Exhibit A. You have Hunter Road on there.
I'm unsure why that's even on there.
So again, that needs to be removed.
There should be no exhibit.
But again, just keep in mind that you will now have other
Understood.
groups that are going to come out to something that they have fought with our Parks and Leisure, trying to get space when we were so overcrowded to begin with. It's just our regular sporting events that the used to be the PALS program did. Again, so I think this is a wonderful thing. So obviously, any more discussion? Yes.
There's two language in the narrative phrase that I just highlighted, Ms. Ward, in the narrative. Youth of the community, and then participating members. Are they inclusive of one another, or are they?
Yes. It is a youth program, and the members are just referring to the participants.
The members of the travel ball.
But is it open to members of the community, youth
Yeah.
of the community, or is it an exclusive group?
It's open to anyone that wants to participate in travel volleyball.
Yes.
Got you. Now, how does this relate to recreation? And I know this is not for you now, this is for the administration. I do know that we have, at some point in time, we'll receive a recommendation from that recreation task force or consultant that hadn't come in yet. And these are basically, a lot of times, one of the things when I was on the school board, we allowed churches to rent schools during the Sunday service. Became very, before then, the community was able to use those facilities, but once the church started, it took that school district rental into a whole different category. I'm just wondering whether this is a foundation to take our facility or our resource to a different level, which makes it very difficult for people like me to have access to facilities. That's not a question for you. I'm just making a statement, that's all.
Anderson.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Are Exhibit A and B and C just generic for us to look at? Because,
Those exhibits should not have been on
Yeah,
there.
Exhibit
okay,
C.
because C has the wrong name and everything else.
Yeah.
Those exhibits, I'm not
That was the
sure.
30-day
They
notice,
ignore
line,
that.
right?
Yeah, I'm reading it going, I think
I'm-
Mr. Greenway's been replaced. I don't understand.
Didn't make any
I'm not
sense.
sure how those are on there,
Yeah,
so that will
okay.
be amended when going to council.
That's okay, thanks.
So this would go to council, this would require
Goes-
ratings or
Goes to council and requires a public hearing, so it may not be on your next council agenda.
okay.
We have to advertise.
All right, is there a motion then to accept this, lease?
I'll make the motion.
Motion.
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
Are we gonna be able to get a copy of the proposed lease?
Yes, I can attach one to it, for this new council's knowledge. There was a lease policy that was actually put in place. We previously did not have one. So any and all leases will be substantially similar to that of our lease policy. Clearly, every lease, as you know, is different. They're gonna have certain terms that aren't applicable, such as clearly for the use of a volleyball facility, we're not gonna have capital improvements to the facility. That would be one that was removed. But in general, there is a lease template that we're trying to put into place for consistency.
If I may make two statements about this before you all vote. One, I want to just point out to county council, this is not a Parks and Rec facility that's being leased. This is a previous building that was used for dead storage, EMS material, and old surplus furniture. We moved that material out of this warehouse to Harris Pillow, where, as you all know, we can have storage, but we can't have people. So when I was presented with this problem from the volleyball folks here that have been struggling with this for many years, I thought this was a equitable solution to solve their needs, and also that would provide a service to youth in Beaufort that we often hear about. Currently, these folks have to practice many evenings out in the front yard of Mr. Dixon, who has a sand volleyball court literally set up in his front yard. I know this because it's in my neighborhood. I go by it every day. So this was an opportunity for us to work with him to provide this service for him to have an indoor facility to practice because of the difficulty he was having in obtaining appropriate facilities with the school district, who often changed the times that he could practice because of their own needs. We have the same issue in Parks and Rec facilities with travel ball folks, is sometimes they want to use the facilities at the same time that we're using them for county Parks and Rec programming. But certainly, if there is an opportunity for us to work with those folks outside of our normal programming activities, I have instructed our recreation folks to work with individuals in this particular case.
Good.
We need
And,
a second.
yes,
Have made the first.
I'll make a second on that.
all right, good. So we have a first and a second. Is there any more discussion? Seeing no discussion, we will approve this without objection. If there's any objection, there is no objection. Let's move on then to county council. All right, let's move on to our final item, which is 2023 agencies, boards, and commissions, appointments and reappointments. Let me just say that we have a list here, and that list, these individuals in your packets, they have been properly vetted and meet all the mandatory requirements to serve. Upon approval of this item, these names will then move on to county council for approval. And at our next meeting, you will all receive information regarding current vacancies, including district-specific vacancies, so we can begin working on filling those. So again, this is for people that are currently already on boards that have been approved. We're just reappointing them or actually approving them to continue the work that they've been doing. So any questions or discussions on what you have before you on any of these? All right, seeing none, I'd ask for a motion then to approve all these folks. Mr. Passman, thank you.
I would
Is there-
make the motion to approve the listing of individuals to be appointed to the various boards.
Is there a second?
A second.
All right, second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, it will be approved without objection, and I see no objection. It has been approved. So again, that brings us to the end of our meeting. I don't see anyone that would like to speak in citizens' comment. Let me just say, an hour and 40 minutes seems like a long time, but for finance meetings, this is actually fairly short.
Yes.
We had 235 pages of backup, so don't expect this every time. And also let you know that I don't try to rush through meetings. I try to give everyone a chance to speak and go through them. So you can expect that from meetings to come. Staff, thank you for your help and everything you've done. We appreciate all that you do and all the hard work. So thank you, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.